Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about neurons. Now, neurons are just a type of specialised cell within the nervous system that allow transmission of electrical signals. There's three types of neuron we're going to learn about that all have different structures: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and relay neurons. So we're going to start off with sensory neurons. So a sensory neuron will be involved whenever you have an organ which can sense something. So whenever you touch, smell, see, hear, or taste something, that starts off at these things called receptors. For example, you have receptors in your skin that allow you to feel things, and you have receptors in the retina of your eye that allow you to detect light. So what we have here is all of these neurons have a cell body. Now the cell body is where the nucleus is, and this is the cytoplasm. So it's kind of like a normal animal cell, but only with these other features. So this part here before the cell body is called a dendron. So receptors is where what detects the signal in the first place. Let's say I touch something. The electrical impulses travel down the dendron, past the cell body, and to probably somewhere within the central nervous system. For example, a part of my brain that allows me to have the sensation that I'm touching something. This part here is called an axon. So an axon is just the long part here where the electrical signal travels down. A good way of remembering it is axons always travel away, the signal always travels away from the cell body. Dendrons always take, or dendrites always take information towards a cell body. In this particular case, the electrical impulse is travelling that way down. Okay, so that's a sensory neuron involved in sensation or feeling things, being able to sense things. Number two is motor neurons. Now, motor neurons are normally what we associate with movement, but not always. For example, they can be attached to glands as well. But motor neurons are a bit different in structure. So at the beginning, they have a cell body rather than having receptors. For example, this could be within the central nervous system, within the brain, let's say. What it then has is this long part here, and just like within the sensory neuron, that long part is called an axon that I'll label in just a second. Okay, so just finished drawing this. So this long protrusion is called an axon. So let's say I want to move my finger. These dendrites, first of all, they carry electrical impulses towards the cell body. So this is me wanting to move my finger. The electrical impulse, this cell will be within the brain, this cell body in the brain. Then the electrical impulse will travel down the axon. So this thing here, the muscle in my finger, and in this particular scenario, the muscle is referred to as an effector. This is just where the effect happens. The effect is to contract my muscle to move it. Now, those things there are called dendrites. Remember, dendrites take electrical impulses towards the cell body. Axon A is for axon, A is for electrical impulses away from the cell body. So the impulse is travelling down that way. Oops, down that way. Now, the final thing we need to know about motor neurons is they have these things called a myelin sheath. Nice way of remembering it is M is for motor, M is for myelin. M is usually to do with movement, M is usually to do with muscle. So the myelin sheath insulates the axon, so we get nice fast transmission. For example, Stephen Hawking, he had a disease called motor neuron disease, where the myelin sheath broke down, which means his impulses could not travel down to his muscles, meaning he couldn't move. However, his sensory neurons were fine, so he could still see, and he could still touch, and he could still hear, because these types of neurons were fine. They don't have myelin. Think motor, myelin. The third type of neuron, and final type of neuron we need to know about, is a relay neuron. Now, the way I always remember the job of a relay neuron is I think about a relay race. In a relay race, a baton is passed from one runner to the next. A relay neuron takes information from one neuron to the next. So what we have again is we have these protrusions coming out called dendrites. Now these dendrites would be attached to sensory neurons. What we then have, again, that long protrusion, hopefully by now we know that that's called an axon. So this is where the electrical signal passes down. We then have these connections here, which can then pass the signal on, just like in a relay race, it can then pass that signal on to a motor neuron. So just to put that into context, let's say in a reflex arc, I put my hand on something hot. That would be detected by these receptors in a sensory neuron, and the information would travel down here to, down this dendron, down the axon, to a relay neuron, one of these. That information would then go from the dendrite towards the cell body, down the axon, and then it would connect to a motor neuron. The information would travel down the dendrite towards the cell body, then down this axon to the muscle in order to move my finger away from the stimulus that was causing it harm. So those are the three types of neuron. That's how they all look different from each other. That's their different jobs and functions. And that is all I'm going to say on it. Thank you.